It's week 4 of rankings, and today we have the power forwards. If you missed the first 3 positions, check out the channel, as every single week we're going to be going through, giving you a new position, going through the top 10, some honorable mentions, and eventually capping off this stretch with a top 10 overall player rankings in the NBA today. If you like consistent, high-quality sports and or fantasy football content, support us as we do it for absolutely free 4 times a week. We haven't missed a day here in 10 months. So please support us down below. We're on the road to 500 subs. As always, timestamps will be in the description of the video. Without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's dive into the criteria. Alright, it's week 4 of rankings. If you watched any of these so far, you kind of get the gist, but it's on your screen now for the basic overview. As again, positions will be based off of Basketball Reference. I needed a base for all of these players, and Basketball Reference was the place I went. But I also used logic, as if 2 players on the same team were listed at the same position, I just thought, what makes the most sense for how this team and lineup will be constructed come regular season time? We're going to be looking at the skill of the overall player, right? That is important on a list like this. Their availability as of late, the last couple years, their recent team success, individual moments, their situation, individual stats. Basically, we're looking at everything here for all of these players. And without further ado, let's hop into some honorable mentions. And we're going to get in here to Draymond Green. This is one of the hardest leaves off the list, and he was closer than you think to being top 10 in this list. But he's definitely taken a step back in his game, and I know his impact doesn't come with numbers. It's more so on-court production. However, I think he has, again, taken that step back, and I would just prefer 10 other guys over him in the NBA currently. Moving over to Jerami Grant. Again, he was maybe the hardest leave off of this list. A guy that's giving you 20 and 7 a night. He's really taken a step up every single year of his career. It's something to admire, right? As he is minorly improved each and every year of his career. But again, maybe the hardest leave off this list. He was actually on the initial set of rankings for this position, but I made a minor change at the very end there, and you'll see who number 10 is. Kyle Kuzma, he should take a big jump this year. I think with it just being him and Jordan Poole there in Washington with Deni Avdija, I think Kyle Kuzma can jump up to maybe that 23 to 25 points per game mark. Should be a special season, as he doesn't have a lot of competition there for shot attempts, right? As far as Aaron Gordon and Cam Johnson, look, these are 2 dirty work guys for their teams and their situations, but these are 2 dirty work guys that any championship level team would want, right? All championship level teams need a guy like this, a guy that's going to play 2 sides of the ball, play gritty, do what the team needs to win at a high level, right? And Aaron Gordon and Cam Johnson are 2 of the very best at what they do. They just didn't make the list as a couple other guys that just either play bigger roles or they're just a little bit more talented. To kick off the top 10 list, I went with the young man for the Orlando Magic, Paolo Banchero. This is the guy that barely edged out Draymond Green and Jerami Grant for this number 10 spot. But for the Magic to be a franchise that has been kind of tortured by bad lottery luck these last couple years, they finally have gotten their break with the number 1 pick out of Duke last year in Paolo Banchero, as I'd say he had an okay rookie year. I'd say that he got his career off to the right start, on the right foot is a better way to put it. In his first ever career game, he put up 25 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and in that debut game, that was the only game of that caliber stats-wise since LeBron James in 2003. So I'd say that Paolo set the stage to be a consistent scorer and playmaker for this Magic team early on in his career, right? Quite literally, first game. But he eventually, again, would be the unanimous Rookie of the Year. So again, I'd say he did at least okay there in his rookie year. But at 6'10", I mean, he has a rare combination of strength and fluidity to his game. And I really think he could eventually one day be one of the best scorers here in the NBA. But to hit that next level, in my opinion, to be that next Carmelo, which is what his prototype is, it's no secret that his jump shot needs to improve. I think in February, it was one of those months there where he was like 2 of 30 from the three-point line. Again, a lot of young players struggle from outside the arc, but that is kind of abysmal. That is terrible to go 2 of 30 in any stretch at anything in basketball, right? So you want to see the jump shot improve, but right now his playmaking vision and his interior ability to score at the basket is just something like we haven't seen in many rookies throughout the years. So, I mean, this is a guy that's also a Swiss Army knife right next to Franz Wagner there in Orlando. Both guys can be lead ball handlers out of handoffs, post-ups, as a screener. Paolo can do a little bit of everything for this young Magic team. You would also like to see improvement defensively, but a lot of these young players, they struggle defensively and with their jump shots early on. So I'm not going to deck him for that as of right now. Now, next year, if he has these same struggles, he's going to get decked points for that as a sophomore player. But as a rookie, it's common to see those flaws in a young player, right? But as of right now, he already looks like he has the potential to compete for multiple All-NBA spots in his career, if not MVPs, if the Magic can get things going in the right direction. But Paolo Banchero, to me, showed a lot in his rookie year, and there's no doubt he's a top 10 power forward to me here in year number 1, which is very impressive. So shout out to Paolo Banchero. Number 9, we're going to go with EV4, Evan Mobley. And I know, number 9 might seem low, but as a Cavs fan, if someone has to get knocked a couple spots, just like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, I'm okay with being my own players, right? I'm okay with it being the hometown guys. But Evan Mobley, I mean, he's already a high-impact player on both sides of the floor with high usage and multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards in his future. He was a top 3 Defensive Player of the Year candidate this year in just his second year. So shout out to Evan Mobley. He has given us hope here in Cleveland. But for a big that can move so gracefully with touch, intelligence, footwork, and even tenacity at sometimes, it is a cherished breed, right? And again, as a Cavs fan, we are lucky to have him. But even though he went to the playoffs against the Knicks, and you really forgot that he was on the court most times, as he was getting out-rebounded and kind of outplayed by Mitchell Robinson. That's not what you want to see out of a guy that has the potential to be a franchise guy. But that's just something we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to see if he can grow and develop throughout the years. And if he can, I think there's a realistic chance this guy could be the best player on our team at the end of next season. And that might be a hot take. But as a Cavs fan, I think Evan Mobley has the potential to be better than Donovan Mitchell one day and be the best player on this team, a guy who can average 20 and 10 year in and year out and be a defensive player of the year candidate on a yearly basis, right? But he also is the most important player for the Cavs team, in my opinion, as with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell being undersized guards, they're not the best backcourt defenders either. I think Evan Mobley is the most pivotal part to the Cavs' title future here in the next couple years, because he does cover up for a lot of what our backcourt lacks, right? Especially on the defensive side of the ball. But this year, I want to see an improvement in his jumper. I want to see improvement just in his overall aggressiveness offensively. And if he can do that, again, I think he's going to shoot up these rankings next year. But he also might be in the contention for the best player on this young Cavs team that does have an All-NBA player in Donovan Mitchell. Might be a hot take, but I think he's the most important player for us, and he has the possibility to be the best player for us after next season. Moving over to number 8, we're going to have Kristaps Porzingis. And Kristaps has had a roller coaster of a career, in all honesty. In his first 3 seasons in New York, Kristaps was overshadowed by Carmelo Anthony, rightfully so at that time, but he was shooting like 36% from 3 on a couple attempts a game. He had a top 10 block percentage, and he was top 10 in a lot of defensive metrics. Eventually, he would give you about 23 a night, as well as giving you the crazy defensive effort in those first 3 years in New York. So everything seemed to be going right for Kristaps to eventually succeed Carmelo there in New York and keep them in contention tier, right? But then in 2018, in his 4th season, as with a lot of these taller, lanky bigs, Kristaps would eventually tear his ACL. But then after the unfortunate injury, and of course some disagreements there with the New York front office, he was eventually traded to Dallas to pair up with an emerging Luka Doncic, and that team was looked at to do some special things. Of course, they didn't. A lot of it was because Kristaps Porzingis, he had a lot of knee issues in his time in Dallas, and of course, he was discontent just with his overall involvement in the offense, and that kind of pushed Dallas to want to trade him for quite literally anyone, and he was essentially traded to Washington a couple years after to die, right? His career to die, as Washington was in the middle of no man's land at the time. They kind of still are. But he was essentially traded there just to, here, go over there, get some shots up, and you're going to be a role player for the rest of your career. But Kristaps Porzingis kind of flipped the script, as his stock has gradually climbed over his time in Washington. And as you see, he was just traded to Boston this past offseason for some draft capital. So shout out to Kristaps for kind of turning that dead part of his career around and now becoming a perennial all-star yet again, or at least in contention for that, right? But this is a guy that's going to Boston. He's going to be legitimately, it's going to be the first time in his career where he can compete for a title. And he's going to be, I think we're going to see the full capabilities of Kristaps this year, as there is some defensive concerns on the perimeter. But on the interior, this is a guy that does everything for Boston. And on offense, he's going to space the floor for Jason Tatum. He's going to space the floor for Jaylen Brown. And I think, coincidentally, his time in Dallas has prepared him to take a lesser role in the offense and go out there and be that third option for this Boston offense. Go out there and average 15 to 20. Be efficient on your shots, right? As you're not going to get as many shots as Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, but when you get them, just be efficient, and we know he can do that as he shoots like 40% from three on high volume as a 7'3" big man. That doesn't come around often. Kristaps Porzingis, I think he's very underrated at this point, and I think he just edges out Evan Mobley for that number 8 spot. Moving over to number 7, Zion Williamson. How do you have this guy that low? How do you have a guy of this talent and this caliber at number 7? Again, it came down simply to availability. I love Zion Williamson as the player, but again, it wouldn't be fair to the criteria and to the other players on the list if I have him there, if I have him any higher than this, right? But again, I'd also be lying if I said I wasn't grading him a little harder than some other players on this list due to his potential. We know what Zion can be. We know he can be in the MVP conversations each and every year, but it's his availability that has kind of pushed him down this list just a little bit. But he is a one-of-one bulldozer offensively. He's a 6'6" power forward that is stronger than everybody in the league aside from probably Steven Adams. But this is a guy that running downhill, he's unstoppable. You don't want to get in his way because you'll get dunked on. But you also, he has terrific touch around the basket, and he can also read the floor. At some points, New Orleans likes to do point Zion, so that's pretty fun to watch. But no one has ever looked and moved like this guy at 22. Again, he's 6'6", can jump out of the gym. Maybe he has the most impressive bounce in the league. But again, he's more so known for being questionable and doubtful and out than a generational star, which is what he was viewed to be coming out of Duke. But even with his flaws and his questions and when, whether if he's available or not, when he is on the court, when he is playing, he has been dominant. From his first career game against the Spurs to now, when he's on the court, he's been dominant. He averages 27 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He's a 2-time All-Star and a 2-time starter, and he was on pace to be 3 times in both of those categories this year, no doubt. But he was also on pace to be All-NBA this year before his injury. But again, this Pelicans team, when Zion was healthy, was the number 1 seed for a stretch of time there, and that was with Brandon Ingram missing some time. So Zion has the potential to be generational, but he can't be on the floor. And with that being said, it's hard to put him any higher than 7. I'm grading him a little bit harder because of his potential. Zion's an amazing talent. I just want to see him on the court, right? I'm a selfish basketball fan. I just want to see Zion on the court a little bit more than what he's given us right now, and a lot of it, again, isn't his fault. But I need him to be a little bit more lucky. I need him to be on the court and to give us all fans what we want here. But moving over to number 6, it is Julius Randle. And I'm not the biggest Julius Randle fan. I'll start by saying that because this is maybe the most frustrating player in the league. But it could also be just his situation there in New York. But Julius Randle has 2 modes. He has an on and off switch. Because at his best, when the light switch is on, he is an All-NBA level player who will put bigger defenders on their heels, or he can also bully the smaller ones as he attacks the paint. He's also one of the best playmakers at his position in the NBA and in his offense, of course, aside from Jalen Brunson there. But at his worst, when the light switch is off, this is a guy that is pursuing his own stats. This is a guy that is stat hungry. He's so desperate to take over the game and be the guy all the time. He holds on to the ball way too long, and he lacks defensive effort, right, when his shot is not falling, and that hurts the entire team, and that's why New York fans kind of want him out the door, right, as he's not the most consistent player, especially in big moments. But this season was a prime example of what it can be, or what a roller coaster of a ride it can be here with Julius Randle. The shooting is likely always going to be up and down there with Julius Randle, as we've seen that throughout his entire career. So next season projects to be a down season shooting-wise for Julius Randle. Regardless, the better that Randle shoots, the more respect he draws and the more opportunities he has to do what he does best, and that is just to be an overall better player, and play make, give effort defensively. But if his shot is not falling, it is almost like you're playing 2K MyProg, right? Or going into the rec, as if you play with someone else who, if they don't make their first 2 shots, they're not playing defense. They just want to score the ball. And sometimes it feels like that with Julius Randle. It feels like he's at the park just trying to get his highlights and his stats. Sometimes most times, that's not going to lead to winning basketball. But Julius Randle, he's still a top 6, top 5 level power forward. I don't want to disrespect him. I just don't always agree with his play style. Regardless, it's going to be an interesting year in New York there to try and figure out the right window to pursue for their future. Do they keep Julius Randle for the long haul? Do they just go in 100% commit to Jalen Brunson, trade Julius Randle, right, for either more draft capital or another star? It'll be interesting to see how this year plays out, especially with Tibbs. Is he going to be there for the entirety of next season? We're going to have to look out for that. But Julius Randle, my number 6 power forward. As you see the list, I'll give you a second here to look at my 6 through 10. We'll recap it here at the very end of the video. But that is my 6 through 10. And moving over to my number 5 spot in my best Paul Heyman impersonation, the reigning, defending Defensive Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson Jr. This is an evolutionary shot blocker who was so good throughout the regular season that at one point, many thought his stats were inflated. That's how good he was on the defensive side of the ball last year. But by his skill set, when you watch him, many believe that there's still a lot of untapped potential there offensively, and his offense is really what held him back from being any higher on this list. But as of now, Jaren he puts a lot of pressure on the offense at times. When his team tells him you are the go-to scorer, you see a different level of aggression. And I think he's still searching for that right balance right now when Ja is on the floor, right? And even though they've had a couple years together, it seems like at times he could be a lot more conservative than what he should be, right? But I am excited to see what Jaren can do this year when he can spread his wings offensively here, because the first 25 of the games of the year, we know Ja Morant's going to be suspended, and when Ja is suspended, that's most of the time that's when Jaren really takes a step up and is more aggressive and shows signs of this different side of his offensive game. So I'm excited to see what he can do for the first 25 games of the year. That's a big stretch for this Grizzlies team, and it all starts with Jaren Jackson Jr., at least on both sides of the ball. I do believe he's going to be everywhere, swatting shots on the perimeter, on the interior, in transition. I think he's going to be that amazing off-ball defender that we've seen last year, and I think overall he just embodies what it means to be a Defensive Player of the Year. But I want to see some growth offensively, and that is the only reason he's not higher on this list. But Jaren Jackson, number 5 spot, reigning, defending Defensive Player of the Year. Moving over to Karl-Anthony Towns at my number 4 spot, and hear me out on this one. I know this guy hasn't done much the last couple of years, but he still has some of the most obvious gravity here in the league. He's still a franchise-level center, and we know defense is still an issue, right? We know that. And he is currently on a team that was dramatically reconstructed the last couple years with the new management team, and they really had his weaknesses in mind. It is clearly now Anthony Edwards' team over Karl-Anthony Towns' team. So I guess it is now Ant's team, not Cant's team. So Ant's for the win, I guess, right? But at his very worst, this is a 27-year-old defensive liability who at times can be a turnover machine, and he can't stay healthy. And you're paying him a boatload of money, if I can talk. But at his best, this is a 7-footer who can really shoot. Maybe the best shooting big of all time. This is a guy that can also shoot, drive, pass. It's difficult for opponents to come up with the strategy to slow Cat down when he's on, because he is, a franchise level center. I mean, this Timberwolves roster hasn't always been perfectly constructed, and that's another thing we can point to. But Karl-Anthony Towns has never been surrounded by more talent than he is now, and he's finally on a team that is set to go all in to win right now. At least since Jimmy Butler left, this is the first time that he's had that. I think this is the year he needs to show that it is a conversation. It is a conversation if you want to keep Ant or me on this team. I think he needs to show why he is one of the generation's best players at his position. But this year, the biggest question for me, for Cat, is how much of a conversation can you make this? Right now, I think it is clearly, a lot of people believe it's Ant's team moving forward. How much of a conversation can you make this, right? To show people, hey, I may have been injured, but when I'm healthy, this is still my organization. That's going to be the thing I look out here for Cat in 2023. Moving over to my number 3 spots. It might be a hot take, but I'm going to go with Pascal Siakam, right? This is a do-it-all player who's expanded his game each and every year of his career, and he has become the face of the Toronto Raptors franchise after Kawhi left town. Regardless of whether Siakam has fallen out of favor in Toronto is another story, right? But this is still a 2-time All-Star that continues to perform at an all-around level. He shot almost 50% from the field last year, averaging 24, 8, and 6. He brings elite versatility, I believe, on both sides of the ball. And this is an advanced stat that I saw for Pascal, so stick with me. But his combined 16 win shares over the last 2 years is an above average rate around the league. So I guess if you want the advanced stats, there it is for Pascal Siakam. But Siakam makes sense for me at my number 3 spot here. He is Tornado P, spin cycle P. He, regardless of whether his skill set or his go-to move is, he is still a top 3 power forward to me, as he's also one of the most underrated players in the league. I think if he goes to a situation like New York for Julius Randle or another big market, I think a lot of the world is going to come around to this idea as well, that if they're not already, that Pascal is an elite power forward, and he should be top 3, top 4 in a lot of people's rankings. Moving over to number 2, no shocker here. I think we can all kind of get the overall gist and idea who the top 2 guys are. If you clicked on the thumbnail of the video, I think you would have an idea. But Kevin Durant, putting all of the injuries and dramas aside from the last couple years, Kevin Durant is still one of the best players in the game. He's a lethal scorer who could do it all without difficulty. Need I remind you, we've never seen anything like Kevin Durant in our time here in the NBA. This is the first ballot Hall of Famer, and those accolades, they don't mean much for this video, but I still want to read these off to you because he's becoming one of the most overhated and overrated, or not overrated, but overhated players in NBA history. But he's a former MVP. He's a 2-time Finals MVP. He is a 12-time All-Star. He's a 4-time scoring champion. And aside from his rookie season, this is the most impressive stat aside from his MVP, Kevin Durant has never averaged less than 25 points per game in his career. I don't know if that's ever been done aside from like the Wilts of the world. So that's impressive, right, for Kevin Durant. He's arguably the best offensive scorer we've ever seen here in the NBA aside from stats. But from a talent perspective, he might be the best offensive scorer we've ever seen. Even at 34 years old, he still might be the game's best scorer, and to me, he's no doubt a top 10 player in the league, and he might, no doubt be number 2 on this list. It's a big year there in Phoenix as Kevin Durant is currently on his 82nd Big 3. Can he get over the hump without Steph Curry? That's the biggest question for Kevin Durant this season. I don't think it's any shocker he can get there. I think they're the only real competition to Denver as of now in the Western Conference. Moving over to the number 1 spot, it is the Mbappe impersonator is a way to put it. But we're going to go with Giannis Antetokounmpo. There's no need to question why Giannis is the best power forward in the league as of right now. He may be the best player in the league. I think he's the only player that can question Nikola Jokic as of right now. We'll have to see in a couple weeks if I have him at number 1 or 2. But this past season, he averaged a career high 31 points a game. He was an all-star captain. He led the Bucks to the first seed in the East. He was top 3 in MVP voting, and of course, he was All-NBA first team. He did a little bit of everything here for the Bucks this year. And honestly, it felt like it was the best Bucks team of all time, in my opinion. I stated that a lot throughout the year. I still believe that. I still believe that that was the best Bucks team of all time in their franchise history. And they just, due to an injury to Giannis, they just fell short in the playoffs. But let's not forget that even just a few years ago, this is a guy that brought Milwaukee their first title in over 50 years. And even at his young age, he is already in the conversation for a top 25, top 10 player of all time. Right, not top 10, but top 25, top 50 player of all time, right? I think, his accolades as of right now, he's already achieved more than 95, 96% of the league. There's no doubt he's number 1 in the league currently at his position, but is he still number 1 in the NBA overall? Coming into the year, I said Giannis was the best player. Is he better than Jokic as of now? That's an argument we'll have here in 2 weeks. But to me, Giannis, no doubt, either number 1 or number 2 on everyone's list here for best players in the league. And I think let's say he wins another ring next season. I mean, we're talking about an all-time great here in Giannis Antetokounmpo, even at his young age. Moving over to the recap here, as on the next screen you're going to see, my 10 through 6 goes as follows. We have Paolo Banchero, Evan Mobley, Kristaps Porzingis, Zion Williamson, and Julius Randle as my 10 through 6. My 5 through 1 goes as follows. We have Jaren Jackson Jr., Karl Anthony Towns, Pascal Siakam, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let me know what you guys think down below. Again, if these players are one spot too high or too low for you, I wouldn't cause too big of a fuss about it, right? Unless you have Pascal Siakam over KD, that's a conversation to have. But if you have, Zion better than Julius Randle, or Julius Randle better than Jaren Jackson Jr., they're one spot difference. It's not that big of a difference, right? On the list, I want to cause yourself a headache to argue about it in the comments. But moving over to around the NBA, Jaylen Brown has agreed to a 5-year, $304 million extension. Man, I had some athletic genes. But this is the now biggest contract in NBA history. And again, for now, that will be passed by whoever gets the next big extension. But he's going to be receiving a lot of money up front in these first 2 or 3 years. And in his trade, or in the contract, he cannot be traded until the 2024 offseason. And that is, of course, to a team of his choosing. So Jaylen Brown, if something goes downhill dramatically this next year, Jaylen Brown, I mean, he's still going to have the choice on where he wants to go after next season. So shout out to Jaylen Brown, though. Generational money, generational wealth for his family and his future family, right? But shout out to Jaylen Brown. Shout out to the Celtics. But they still need to pay a guy who's going to have more money than this on his next extension in Jason Tatum. Team USA, they have announced their 14-player select team. As we know, the FIBA World Cup is coming up here pretty soon. And their select team is just the team that the actual team practices with just to get better throughout the offseason. But for the guard position, we have Cade Cunningham from the Pistons, Jalen Green from the Rockets, the number 1 and 2 picks there in their draft a couple years back, Quentin Grimes, Langston Galloway, which was very interesting to see. He's a free agent. Last time I seen him, he was on the Knicks in like 2019, right, or 2016. Regardless, Langston Galloway is on the select team. Peyton Pritchard, John Jenkins out of the G League, super young guy there. For the forwards, they have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, two young wings there for the New Orleans Pelicans, and also Keegan Murray, a top 3 Rookie of the Year candidate from last year. So shout out to those guys. And for the big position, we have Jalen Duren. Shout out to him. I really like Jalen Duren. Chet Holmgren, Eric Micah, Naz Reid, who just got an extension, so shout out to Naz Reid, and Jalen Williams. So a lot of first or second year guys here for the select team, which is typical throughout the years. But shout out to those guys. A lot of younger guys there. I wonder who the oldest guy here is on that list. Maybe it's Naz Reid, right? Naz Reid might be the oldest guy here on this list, aside from Langston Galloway. But regardless, shout out to those guys as they're going to be getting our national team better, right? Nikola Jokic will sit out the FIBA World Cup to rest for next season. So shout out to Jokic, as we know he's going to play when the Olympics come around, right? In a couple years. But for the FIBA World Cup, you can sit out this, right? You can sit this one out. JB Bickerstaff, coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, is quote unquote under immense amount of pressure this year. So, rightfully so. This Cavs team fell short big time in the playoffs last year. A lot of people had us at least winning the first round, and we fell short in a bad way. So JB Bickerstaff has a lot to figure out. As a Cavs fan, I wouldn't mind moving off of a guy like JB Bickerstaff. Kyle Anderson, Mr. Slow-Mo Anderson, he has officially gained his Chinese citizenship, and he's going to play at the FIBA World Cup for the Chinese team, for China's team rather. And so shout out to Kyle Anderson, right, to get some PT there in China. The 76ers, they are protected from James Harden holding out due to an obscure clause in the new NBA CBA. So Harden, if he is a Sixer going into next year, he's going to be forced to suit up. So shout out to the new CBA, right? It sucks when we see star players like that sitting out games, because we know the talents that they are, even though James Harden has had his doubters the last couple years. Nick Nurse, the coach of the 76ers, he plans to turn Paul Reed into a Pascal Siakam type player. That is very interesting, as this team didn't really give Paul Reed a contract. Instead, they matched the contract at the very last moment. And, of course, Nick Nurse is coming over from the Raptors, who had Pascal Siakam. So it's going to be interesting to see Paul Reed, a guy who's really just kind of been a backup big, a guy who plays 15, 20 minutes a night, gives you good minutes in his young career. It's going to be a crazy leap to see him go from that to an all-NBA level player in this world, because he would be turned into a Pascal Siakam. So Nick Nurse, it'll be interesting to see if he can do that yet again here. But the Atlanta Hawks and the Orlando Magic, they play in Mexico City on November 9th. This will be the matchup. This matchup will be the league's 32nd game in Mexico since 1992, which is more than any other country outside of U.S. and Canada. So shout out to the Hawks, shout out to the Magic. They're going to get a nice little trip there out of it. And that's really going to do it for today's show. We went through the top 10 power forwards. We went through some of the recent news around the association. And again, that's going to do it for today's show. We're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. So if you made it this far, obviously you enjoy listening to the podcast at least a little bit. We're only about 70 subs away from 500, so help us get there. Share the pod with your friend, your mom, your grandma, your grandfather. It does not matter. Keep getting the pod out there, and if you have to go on their phone to subscribe, hey man, I greatly appreciate it, right? But again, that's going to do it. We'll be back tomorrow with a mock draft, a new style of mock draft. We're going to be going through some specific strategies you can use here in 2023. And that's going to do it. We'll see you guys tomorrow for the mock draft. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below what you think. We'll see you guys then. Stay happy. Stay healthy. We're out.